Hellboy is back on the big screen in Hellboy, the Crooked Man. Now, ever since the trailers for this film dropped, all I've heard is moaning from a wealth of people about it and about how cheap the film looks. It looks like a fan-made movie, etc, etc. Is the film any good? That's what we're here to discuss. Does it live up to Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy efforts? Or is this more akin to that last Hellboy film that we got? Let's find out. So it wasn't too long ago that the trailers for this movie dropped, and I went in with an open mind. And yes, the film did look a lot cheaper. It looked a lot different to what people know Hellboy to be and the world of Hellboy to be. But is it a bad film? Because it does have a reduced budget. But this film here, it comes at us written and directed by Brian Taylor. Also on writing credits are Christopher Golden and Mike Mignola. Now, Mike Mignola is actually the creator of Hellboy. It's a character owned by him. It's his baby, and he's here writing the script, so that can only be a good thing. Now, he has writing credits, Mike Mignola, on the second Hellboy film, although he really didn't do anything on it whatsoever. Brian Taylor, the writer-director here, he was also the writer-director of things like Mum and Dad, Nicolas Cage film, the TV series Happy, Crank 1 and 2, Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance, the second one. So he's got a bit of a pedigree. The film's rated 15 and runs for 1 hour and 39 minutes. The film itself stars Jack Kesey as Hellboy. I have no idea who this fella is whatsoever. I have seen him in a few bits, but I would never have known it. Jefferson White as Tom Ferrell. We'll come into what these characters are. Joseph Marcel as Reverend Watts, and Adelaine Rudolph as Bobby Joe Song, a parapsychologist with the BRPD. And yes, and they go up against the Crooked Man, a demon that collects souls for the devil. So this film here, it opens with Hellboy and two BRPD agents on board this train, transporting this spider back to the BRPD when things go awry and the train has an accident, or one of the containers has an accident, comes rolling off, the container containing them and the spider, into the Appalachian Mountains, the Appalachian region. And this leads them on this journey of losing this spider, but coming in contact with this small town, a small town that is populated by witches, a remote community in the middle of nowhere. And this town's led by this sinister Crooked Man. The film is set in the 1950s, about 1957. And then we go on this journey of witches, demons, and this film here, I'm going to keep out the spoiler territory not to spoil it for you. Whereas the other Hellboy films are very big, bombastic, brightly coloured kind of special effects extravaganzas, this film isn't. This film leans more into the horror aspect of the comic books. The previous films, especially the Del Toro ones, I like them. They're not really a reflection of what the comic is. It's taken the character and put it into this other world, and it worked for it with Del Toro. But this here, it leans so far into the horror element of the comic books that this film is a horror film. Let's make no bones about it. It is a superhero comic book film horror movie. The film is cheap. It is cheap. It doesn't look big budget. I mean, it's filmed in the middle of nowhere with the minimalistic amount of sets. Most of them are just sort of like wooden cabins kind of efforts, things like that. There are small elements of CGI here and there throughout the film. And to be honest, some of that CGI doesn't get away with looking particularly good at times. The makeup of Hellboy. Again, there are certain issues that I had with the makeup. You can almost see, it looks like you can see where it joins his head, the headpiece, this sort of a thing. But for its cheapness, this film has a wonderful amount of atmosphere. This film really does lean into those horror tropes and plays very well in that ballpark. The actors, you know, you've got, like I said, you've got Hellboy himself, the actor who plays Hellboy. Now, he's not as over the top as what David Harbour or even Ron Perlman. These are character actors that are larger than life, or can give you a character larger than life. Here, Hellboy is far more subdued and more akin to a normal person more than anything else, with a penchant for smoking. Yes, he's a walking nicotine advert in this movie. Jefferson White, Tom Farrell. Now, this is a character that's introduced as one of the townspeople here that has, at a younger age, kind of sold his soul to the Crooked Man. And no matter what happens to him, he's protected by this little bone, his lucky bone that is where he sold his soul to the Crooked Man. And he wants to get that back. He wants to get his soul back. Joseph Marcel was Reverend Watts. Now, this is a character that is introduced, and he's on the side of Hellboy and that. With this is the townsfolk, like priest, reverend, little church where some of the movie is set. And you got Adelaine Rudolph as Bobby Joe Song, who's otherwise called Joe by Hellboy, who's a parapsychologist new to the BRPD. And she's got a bit of a liking for Hellboy himself. And they go on this journey. And by the third act of the film, you have a separation of these characters where each of the characters is kind of tested in their own right, in different areas, and go on their own journeys, facing their own demons, so to speak. You do have a little bit about the origins of Hellboy, but not too much. It doesn't lean into it very heavily at all. But like I said, what you've got is a very atmospheric movie that looks a bit cheap, but it leans heavily and very well into the genre that it's playing in. The sound design on the film is pretty good. I thought that you know, there's some great atmospheric music, background noises, all this sort of a thing. You know, I had fun with this film. I went into it with an open mind, as I suggest you do. Don't expect to get from it what you had in the other Hellboy movies, and you'll come away maybe enjoying it. If you know the comic books, then you know that this leans into that this is the comic book on screen more than anything else. And for me, yes, I always wished that Del Toro would give us a third Hellboy film, or that the studios would give us a third Hellboy film. But if Hellboy continued like this, even with a reduced budget like this, giving us this kind of storytelling, I would be more than happy with it. So for me, this film is a win. Yes, it's not as bombastic as Del Toro's. It's not as visually pleasing as Del Toro's. If I was going to rank these movies, I would put this below the two Del Toro's, but above that previous one that came with David Harbour. But this is a different beast altogether. This is a completely different genre of movie that Hellboy is starring in. But I do think that this will be a bit of a Marmite movie. Some people will like it, some people will hate it, because they know only Hellboy as what Hollywood has given us before.